12 newborn babies, all at once, turned their heads toward the same empty corner of the room. And in that moment, I realized we were not alone. I have been a neonatal intensive care nurse for 17 years. I have spent countless nights in dimly lit rooms, surrounded by the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle hum of ventilators keeping the tiniest patients alive. I have held premature babies, so small they could fit in the palm of my hand. I have witnessed miracles that science cannot fully explain. Babies who survived against impossible odds. Babies who opened their eyes when doctors had given up hope. Babies who fought their way into this world when everything was stacked against them. I thought I had seen everything there was to see in the NICU. I thought I understood the boundaries between the possible and the impossible. And then, on a quiet Tuesday night in February, those boundaries shattered completely, and I witnessed something that still makes my hands tremble when I think about it. This experience was inspired by real accounts shared by NICU nurses on Reddit and various nursing forums, where healthcare workers describe phenomena that medical textbooks cannot explain. What I am about to tell you is my version of a story that dozens of nurses have lived through. Because once you work in the NICU long enough, you start to realize that these babies can see things we cannot. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I work at a children's hospital in Portland, Oregon. I will not name the specific hospital because I still work there, and because some of my colleagues are not comfortable with these stories being shared publicly. But I promise you, every word I am about to speak is true. I was 31 years old when this happened, already a veteran of the NICU with over a decade of experience. I had seen death more times than I wanted to count. I had held mothers while they sobbed over their babies. I had celebrated impossible victories when tiny fighters pulled through against all odds. I considered myself rational, practical, and firmly grounded in medical science. I did not believe in ghosts or spirits or supernatural phenomena. I believed in medicine and technology, in the incredible resilience of the human body. I believed in what I could see, touch, and measure. That belief would be fundamentally challenged on the night I am about to describe. It was a Tuesday night in February, deep in the heart of winter. Portland was wrapped in a blanket of cold rain, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you grateful for warm buildings and hot coffee. I arrived at the hospital around 6:45 p.m. for my night shift, shaking off my umbrella and exchanging greetings with the evening staff who were preparing to leave. The NICU was quieter than usual that night. We had 12 babies in our care, a relatively low census for our unit, which could accommodate up to 20. Most of them were premature infants, born too early and fighting to grow strong enough to go home. A few were full-term babies with complications that required specialized monitoring. All of them were fighters in their own way, tiny warriors battling for every breath. I did my initial rounds, checking vital signs, adjusting monitors, and speaking softly to each baby, even though I knew they could not understand my words. I always talked to them anyway. I liked to think my voice brought them comfort, a reminder that they were not alone in their clear plastic isolates. The first few hours of my shift passed without incident. I charted. I administered medications. I helped a nervous first-time mother learn how to do kangaroo care, holding her premature daughter against her bare chest to promote bonding and warmth. Around 10:30 p.m., most of the parents had gone home for the night, and the NICU settled into the deep quiet that I had grown accustomed to over the years. The lights were dimmed to help the babies sleep. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the soft whoosh of ventilators, and the occasional cry of a baby needing attention. I was at the nurse's station, updating charts on the computer, when my colleague Maria returned from her break. Maria was one of the senior nurses on the unit, a woman in her late 50s who had worked in this NICU for over 30 years. She had silver hair that she always wore in a neat bun, and kind brown eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. I liked Maria. She was calm, competent, and had a dry sense of humor that made the long nights more bearable. But there was something about her that I had never fully understood, a quiet acceptance of things that the rest of us could not explain. Maria sat down next to me and started her own charting. We made small talk for a while, the usual complaints about hospital administration, the usual hope that the night would remain quiet. Around 11:15 p.m., I got up to do another round of checks. I walked slowly through the unit, moving from isolette to isolette, checking monitors and observing each baby. Everything was normal. Some babies were sleeping peacefully. Others were awake, their tiny eyes open, gazing at nothing in particular. I paused at the isolette of a baby girl named Lily, born at just 26 weeks gestation. She was one of our tiniest patients, weighing barely 2 pounds, but she was a fighter. Her parents visited every day, talking to her, reading to her, refusing to give up hope. I adjusted her blanket slightly and whispered, "Keep fighting, little one." Then I moved on. I had no idea that in less than an hour, everything would change. It was exactly 12:07 a.m. when I first noticed something was wrong. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock immediately afterward, trying to ground myself in something concrete, something real. I was standing near the center of the unit, checking the foreline of a baby boy named Marcus, when I felt it, a shift in the atmosphere that I cannot fully describe. The air seemed to grow heavier, thicker, charged with some invisible energy. The temperature dropped by several degrees, enough that I noticed goosebumps rising on my arms beneath my scrubs. I looked up from Marcus and froze. Every single baby in the unit was awake. All 12 of them, at the exact same moment. This alone was unusual enough to make me pause. Babies in the NICU rarely synchronize their sleep patterns. They wake and sleep at different times, following their own individual rhythms. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was that every single one of them had turned their head toward the same corner of the room. The southeast corner. The corner where there was nothing but a wall, a small table with medical supplies, and an old rocking chair that the nurses sometimes used during feedings. I stood frozen, my heart beginning to pound. 12 tiny heads, all turned in the same direction. 12 pairs of eyes, some blue, some brown, some still that indeterminate newborn gray, all fixed on the same empty space. None of them were crying. None of them were fussing or squirming the way babies usually do when they wake. They were completely silent, completely still, just staring. Staring at something I could not see. The silence in the unit was absolute. Even the monitors seemed to quiet, as if the machines themselves were holding their breath. I tried to speak, but found that my voice had abandoned me. My feet were rooted to the floor. I could not move. I could only watch as 12 newborn babies stared at an empty corner with an intensity that made my blood run cold. The moment lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably no more than 2 minutes. I counted later, trying to reconstruct the timeline, trying to make sense of what I had witnessed. During those 2 minutes, I stood paralyzed, my mind racing for explanations. Was there a sound I could not hear? A light reflection I could not see? Some environmental factor that had triggered this synchronized response? I ran through every possible rational explanation, but none of them fit. There was nothing in that corner, nothing visible, nothing audible, nothing that should have captured the attention of 12 infants simultaneously. And yet they all stared as if something was there, something only they could see. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. All at once, the babies turned away. Some closed their eyes and returned to sleep. Others started to fuss, as if waking from a dream. Within seconds, the unit was back to normal. The usual sounds, the usual rhythms, the usual controlled chaos of a neonatal intensive care ward. But I was not normal. I was shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of an isolette to steady myself. I made my way back to the nurse's station, on unsteady legs. Maria was still there, typing on her computer, completely calm. She looked up at me and must have seen something in my face because her expression shifted to one of understanding. Not surprise, not concern, understanding, like she knew exactly what I had just experienced. She said very quietly, "You saw it, didn't you? The babies all looking at the corner." I could only nod, my voice still trapped somewhere in my chest. Maria sighed softly, leaning back in her chair. And then she said the words that changed everything. She said, "Oh, she's back. It's been a few weeks since the last time." I finally found my voice and asked her what she meant. Who was back? What had I just witnessed? Maria looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. Then she glanced around to make sure we were alone, and she began to speak. Maria told me the story of a nurse named Dorothy Patterson. Dorothy had worked in this NICU from 1978 until 1994, 16 years of dedicated service to the smallest and most vulnerable patients. She was, by all accounts, an exceptional nurse. She had a gift with babies, an intuition that went beyond medical training. She could sense when something was wrong before the monitors detected it. She could calm fussy babies just by holding them. She was the one the other nurses called when a baby was struggling, when the usual interventions were not working, when hope was fading. Dorothy was not just a nurse. She was a guardian. And on March 17, 1994, Dorothy died. She had a massive heart attack in the break room, just steps away from the unit she loved. She was 53 years old. The doctors tried to save her, but it was too late. Dorothy Patterson was gone. But according to Maria, according to the nurses who had worked in this unit for decades, Dorothy never really left. Maria told me that strange things started happening in the NICU almost immediately after Dorothy's death. Nurses would feel sudden chills in certain parts of the unit. Monitors would alarm without any apparent cause, drawing attention to babies who were about to crash. And sometimes, often in the quiet hours of the night, the babies would all turn and stare at the same corner of the room. The corner where Dorothy used to sit in the rocking chair during her breaks, watching over her tiny patients. The first time it happened, just a week after Dorothy's death, the nurses were terrified. They called security, checked every inch of the unit, found nothing. But over time, they came to understand what was happening. Dorothy was still doing her rounds. She was still watching over the babies she had devoted her life to protecting. And somehow, in some way that defied every law of science, the babies could see her. I listened to Maria's story with a mixture of skepticism and awe. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as legend, as the kind of ghost story that develops in every old hospital. But I had seen what I had seen. 12 babies, all staring at the same empty corner. That was not legend. That was real. Over the following weeks, I became obsessed with learning everything I could about Dorothy Patterson. I searched through hospital archives, read old newsletters, and talked to every senior nurse who would speak with me. I learned that Dorothy had been widowed young, losing her husband in a car accident when she was only 30. They had never had children of their own, and after his death, Dorothy devoted her entire life to the babies in the NICU. She took extra shifts. She volunteered for holidays. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. The babies in the unit were her family, and she loved them with a ferocity that everyone who knew her remembered. One retired nurse I spoke with, a woman named Patricia who had worked alongside Dorothy for 8 years, told me something that stayed with me. She said that Dorothy had a special gift for knowing when a baby needed her. She would be doing paperwork at the nurse's station and suddenly stand up, walk to a specific isolette, and find that the baby was about to have a crisis. It happened so often that the other nurses stopped questioning it. They just accepted that Dorothy knew things she should not have been able to know. The more I learned about Dorothy, the less afraid I became. This was not a haunting in the traditional sense. There was nothing malevolent about what I had witnessed. If anything, it felt protective. Dorothy had spent her life caring for vulnerable babies, and it seemed she was continuing that mission even after death. The babies staring at the corner were not frightened. They were not crying or distressed. They were simply looking, acknowledging a presence that brought them comfort. Maybe Dorothy was checking on them, the way she had checked on hundreds of babies during her years in the unit. Maybe she was making sure they were safe. And maybe, in some way that I could not understand, the babies could see her because they were still connected to whatever place we come from before we are born. They had just arrived from the other side, and perhaps the veil was still thin enough for them to perceive what the rest of us could not. About 3 weeks after my first experience, it happened again. It was another quiet night, around 2 o'clock in the morning. I was alone at the nurse's station, the other nurse on duty having stepped out to check on a delivery in labor and delivery. The unit was peaceful, the babies sleeping or resting quietly in their isolettes. And then, without warning, I felt that same shift in the atmosphere, that same heaviness in the air, that same drop in temperature. I looked up, and once again, every baby in the unit was awake. Every tiny head was turned toward the southeast corner. Every pair of eyes was fixed on that same empty space. But this time, I was not afraid. This time, I did something I had not done before. I looked directly at the corner and whispered, "Hello, Dorothy. Thank you for watching over them." I did not know if I expected anything to happen. I did not know if I believed she could hear me. But in that moment, I felt something change. The temperature in the room returned to normal. A feeling of warmth washed over me, soft and gentle, like a blanket being wrapped around my shoulders. The babies turned away from the corner, one by one, and settled back into sleep. And for just a second, just a fraction of a moment, I thought I saw something in that corner. Not a clear figure, not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a shimmer. A gentle distortion in the air, like heat rising off summer pavement. It was there and then it was gone, so quickly I could not be certain I had seen anything at all. But I felt it. I felt a presence. I felt a kindness. I felt a love so deep and so pure that it brought tears to my eyes. After that night, I began to notice other things. Small things that I had previously dismissed or ignored. Sometimes, when I was caring for a critically ill baby, I would feel a gentle pressure on my shoulder, as if someone was standing behind me offering support. Sometimes, the rocking chair in the corner would be in a slightly different position than where it had been left, as if someone had just gotten up from it. Sometimes, the temperature in certain parts of the unit would drop suddenly, and the babies nearest to those cold spots would always seem calmer, more peaceful, as if they were being comforted by invisible hands. I stopped being afraid of these occurrences. I started to welcome them, because every time something strange happened, I knew that Dorothy was there. I knew that someone was watching over those babies, someone who had loved them in life and continued to love them in death. The most profound experience I had with Dorothy happened about 6 months after that first night. We had a baby in the unit who was not expected to survive. Her name was Grace, and she had been born with a severe heart defect that was inoperable. Her parents had been told to prepare for the worst. They spent every moment they could at her bedside, holding her tiny hand through the port of the isolette, talking to her, singing to her, loving her with every fiber of their being. But we all knew the end was coming. Grace's heart was failing, and there was nothing medicine could do. On the night Grace died, I was the nurse assigned to her care. Her parents were there, exhausted and heartbroken, holding vigil as their daughter's vital signs slowly deteriorated. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Grace's monitors showed that her heart rate was dropping. Her breathing was becoming shallow. Her time was running out. I stood nearby, giving the family space, but ready to offer support when they needed it. And then something happened that I will never forget. Every baby in the unit woke up. Just like before, every head turned toward the corner. But this time, something was different. This time, the babies were not just looking at the corner. They were looking at Grace. Their tiny eyes moved from the corner to Grace's isolette and back again, as if they were watching someone walk across the room. Grace's mother noticed. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes and asked why all the babies were staring. I could not explain. I could only watch. And then Grace opened her eyes. She had been unconscious for hours, too weak to respond to stimulation. But in that moment, she opened her eyes and looked directly at the corner of the room. Her face, which had been tense with pain and discomfort, relaxed completely. She smiled. It was a tiny smile, barely a flicker of her lips, but it was there. Her mother saw it. Her father saw it. I saw it. Grace smiled at something none of us could see. And then, peacefully, without any struggle or distress, she closed her eyes and slipped away. The monitors alarmed. The numbers flatlined. Grace was gone. But her parents were not crying. They were staring at the corner of the room, the same corner all the babies had been watching. Grace's mother turned to me and said, in a voice filled with wonder rather than grief, "Someone came for her. Someone came to take her home." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I believed her. I believed that Dorothy had come for Grace, had walked across the unit to that tiny isolette, and had guided that beautiful baby girl to whatever came next. The other babies turned away from the corner then, settling back into sleep, their mission as witnesses complete. The unit returned to normal. But for Grace's parents, and for me, nothing would ever be normal again. We had seen something. We had felt something. We had witnessed a moment of grace, in every sense of the word. I have worked in the NICU for 7 more years since that night. I have seen the babies stare at the corner many times. I have felt Dorothy's presence during countless night shifts. I have come to accept that there are things in this universe that science cannot explain, things that exist beyond the boundaries of our understanding. I no longer try to rationalize what I experience. I simply accept it. Dorothy Patterson is part of this unit, as much as any living nurse. She watches over the babies. She comforts them in ways we cannot. She guides the ones who do not survive to whatever beautiful place awaits them. And somehow, in some mysterious way, the babies know she is there. They see her. They acknowledge her. They are not afraid. After my experiences, I started researching whether other NICU nurses had similar stories. What I found astonished me. Accounts from hospitals around the world described the same phenomenon. Babies in intensive care units simultaneously looking at the same spot, often accompanied by temperature drops, equipment malfunctions, or unexplained feelings of peace. Some nurses believed the babies were seeing angels. Others thought they were seeing deceased relatives who had come to welcome the ones who would not survive. Still others, like me, believed they were seeing nurses and doctors who had passed away but continued to watch over their patients. The theories varied, but the experiences were remarkably consistent. There was something about newborn babies, especially those fighting for their lives, that allowed them to perceive things the rest of us could not. One theory I found particularly compelling came from a pediatrician who had spent 30 years working with critically ill children. She suggested that babies, having just arrived from wherever we come from before birth, still have a connection to that realm. Their consciousness is still fresh, still pure, untainted by the expectations and assumptions that adults accumulate over a lifetime. They have not yet learned that they are supposed to see only the physical world. They have not yet built the mental barriers that block our perception of things beyond the ordinary. So they see. They see what we have forgotten how to see. And by the time they grow older, by the time they learn the rules of the physical world, that ability fades. The connection closes. The veil thickens, and they become like the rest of us, blind to the presences that surround us. I have shared Dorothy's story with a few of my closest colleagues. Some believe me. Some are skeptical. Some have had their own experiences that they are not ready to talk about. But one thing I have noticed is that the nurses who have worked in the NICU the longest are the ones most likely to accept what I am saying. They have seen too much. They have witnessed too many unexplainable moments. They have learned that the boundary between life and death is thinner than we think, especially in a place where lives hang in the balance every single day. The NICU is a liminal space, a threshold between existence and non-existence. It is not surprising that strange things happen here. It would be more surprising if they did not. To the parents whose babies I have cared for over the years, I want to say something. If your baby survived the NICU, if your tiny fighter made it home against all odds, know that they were watched over by more than just human nurses. There are guardians in those units that you cannot see, presences that have devoted themselves to protecting the most vulnerable among us. And if your baby did not survive, if you lost your precious child in those sterile rooms, please know this, they were not alone. Someone came for them. Someone guided them home. Someone was waiting on the other side with open arms and infinite love. I have seen it. I have witnessed it. And I believe it with every fiber of my being. Dorothy Patterson has been gone for almost 30 years now, but her presence remains. The rocking chair in the corner is still there, unchanged since the day she died. Sometimes, when the unit is quiet and the lights are dim, I sit in that chair myself. I close my eyes and feel the weight of all the years, all the babies, all the lives that have passed through this place. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel a hand on my shoulder. A gentle pressure, warm and reassuring. And I know that Dorothy is there, still doing her rounds, still watching over her babies. She never left. She never will. If you work in a hospital, especially in a unit that cares for the very young or the very old, pay attention. Watch for the moments when patients seem to see things that are not there. Watch for the synchronized behaviors, the unexplained chills, the equipment that malfunctions at strange times. You may be witnessing something remarkable. You may be seeing evidence of a reality that exists beyond the limits of our ordinary perception. Do not dismiss these experiences. Do not ignore them. Instead, feel grateful. Feel honored. You are being allowed to glimpse something that most people never see. The presence of love that transcends death. Every night shift I work now, I pause at some point to look at the babies in my care. I watch their tiny faces, their delicate hands, their eyes that seem to see so much more than they should. I wonder what they perceive. I wonder if they see Dorothy standing in the corner, watching over them with the same fierce protectiveness she showed in life. I wonder if they see other presences, other guardians, other spirits who have chosen to remain in this place of hope and heartbreak. And I wonder if, when my time comes to leave this world, someone will come for me the way Dorothy came for Grace. Someone who loved me. Someone who has been waiting on the other side. The thought does not frighten me. It comforts me. Because if my 17 years in the NICU have taught me anything, it is this. Love does not die. It persists. It protects. It watches over us in ways we cannot understand. And when we finally close our eyes for the last time, that love is waiting to guide us home. I am sometimes asked why I continue to work in the NICU, especially after everything I have experienced. People assume that these encounters would be frightening, that they would make the job harder, that they would add to the emotional burden of caring for critically ill infants. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Knowing that Dorothy is there, knowing that these babies are watched over by forces beyond my understanding, gives me strength. It reminds me that I am part of something larger than myself. It reminds me that even when medicine fails, even when there is nothing more we can do, there is still someone who can help. There is still someone who can comfort. There is still someone who can guide these precious little souls to wherever they are meant to go. So the next time you are in a hospital and you see something you cannot explain, do not be afraid. Do not dismiss it as imagination or stress or lack of sleep. Consider the possibility that you are witnessing something real, something beautiful, something that proves that consciousness continues beyond the death of the body, that love survives the stopping of the heart, that the people who devoted their lives to caring for others continue that mission even after they are gone. Dorothy Patterson taught me that. 12 newborn babies, all staring at the same corner, taught me that. And I will carry that lesson with me for the rest of my life. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever witnessed something in a hospital that you could not explain? Have you ever felt a presence you could not see? Have you ever watched someone pass away and sensed that they were going somewhere, that someone was there to receive them? I would love to hear your stories, because the more I learn, the more I realize that experiences like mine are not rare. They are happening in hospitals and hospices, in homes all over the world, every single day. We are surrounded by mysteries that we are only beginning to understand. And perhaps if we share our stories, if we listen to each other without judgment, we can start to piece together a picture of reality that is far more wonderful and far more strange than we ever imagined. Even now, as I write these words, I can feel something. A gentle warmth at my shoulder, a sense of being watched, not with hostility, but with love. I like to think it is Dorothy, still keeping an eye on those of us who care for her babies, still doing her rounds, even in places far from the hospital where she served, still protecting, still watching, still loving. Death could not stop her devotion. Nothing ever will. And when my time comes to meet her on the other side, I will thank her. I will thank her for teaching me that the world is more mysterious than I knew. I will thank her for watching over my babies. And I will thank her for proving that love, true love, never dies. What do you believe happens in those quiet hospital rooms when the veil between worlds grows thin? What do newborn babies see that we cannot? I do not have all the answers. I only have my experiences, my beliefs, and the unshakable conviction that Dorothy Patterson is still out there, still working, still loving. And I hope that when you lie awake tonight, thinking about what I have shared, you will feel not fear, but comfort. Because if Dorothy's story is true, and I believe it is, then none of us are ever truly alone. There is always someone watching. There is always someone who cares. And there is always, always love.